I'm announcing my candidacy for mayor of the city of New York.
Well, Preet, I'll just quit my job and help with your campaign.
There is some dissatisfaction with the field. So,
That seems to be emerging. As someone who doesn't live in New York and lives in Alabama, where this sort of internecine fighting inside of the Democratic Party is the norm and not in any way unusual, I have to keep reminding myself that y'all don't do it this way.
yeah. We have ranked choice voting, though. It doesn't always...
No, y'all have ranked choice voting?
In the city, yeah, just recently, just for the last
I
election.
did not know that. I'm familiar with that from Maine, where Shenna Bellows, their Secretary of State, has painstakingly explained it to me so many times that I'm starting to understand it. And the more I hear about it, the more I really like it. Are you not a fan?
No, I am. I just saw one of the messages and it made me laugh.
We do read your messages. They scroll through really fast, but they'll catch our eye while we're talking. So if you see
usually it's my dad. My dad gets on first, but my wife posted a message, which is funny to me. All right. So class, often I make fun of this class, the people who come in because it's in the middle of the afternoon and people have jobs. And you appear to be in an office. I also appear to be in an office because I am. But we got to talk about a civil complaint filed in my old district, the Southern District of New York. And the caption reads, Maurene Comey versus United States Department of Justice and others.
Where have I heard that last name before?
I don't know, but that's, it's a featured part of the complaint. And if you've not been paying attention, folks, Maurene Comey was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York who was fired for reasons that we'll discuss or for no reasons, and that we'll also discuss. And she has filed a suit arguing that her firing was unlawful, unconstitutional, seeking a reinstatement, and a lot of other things. I should say at the outset that I have some standing to talk about this from the perspective of knowing Maurene Comey. I hired her. I'm the U.S. attorney who hired her about 10 and a half years ago. I also hired and supervised one of the lead lawyers who has brought the suit on behalf of Maurene Comey, Ellen Blaine. They are both terrific lawyers and smart people. Should we start? Where should we start, Joyce, about this? Should we start with the circumstances surrounding Maurene's firing or something else?
I think that's right. This is a 30-plus page complaint. I think it's 38 pages. There are, I should know, I've read the whole thing. I think that there are 10 counts. There are 7 or 8 substantive claims, and then there are requests for relief. And it all centers on what the plaintiff, Maurene Comey, alleges is an unlawful firing. And maybe before we talk about her firing, can we talk about her career? That's how the complaint opens. And, this is such a compelling career. In 10 years, she goes from the White Plains office to the big office. She becomes a supervisor. She tries a lot of cases. I think she got something like 200 convictions. She's doing organized crime. She's doing sexual assault. She's doing public corruption cases. This is someone who works hard, understands the job, and does it right for the entire time that she's in Manhattan.
Yeah, so I hired as a line assistant, as I mentioned, but then multiple U.S. attorneys who followed me, including U.S. attorneys who were appointed by the Republican President, Donald Trump, promoted her on multiple occasions and trusted her to either oversee or personally try some of the most sensitive cases, not just in the office, but, in the country over the last decade, including Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Sean Diddy Combs. She oversaw, as chief of the public corruption unit, a case against a very, very powerful and important and influential Democratic senator, Bob Menendez. She worked on a case.
Well, and look, can I just stop right there and say, out the window, any suggestion that she is partisan, right? Prosecuting a Democratic senator pretty much puts that off the table.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know what Maurene Comey's party affiliation is. I don't know if she's
her dad's a lifelong Republican, or at least was.
Correct. So, that's not how we think about how we hire. That's not how we think about how we promote. That's not how we think about who we assign to various cases. She decided at some point that she wanted to go back to the line and try cases. When you talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, and maybe there's an intersection between her fate and Maurene's fate and the Ghislaine Maxwell, documents release issue. But she went back to the line, which is a very unusual and rare thing to do once you become a supervisor and someone in leadership, to say, what I really want to do is be on the ground and in the trenches and try cases. So there is no allegation, and maybe this is relevant to the case she's bringing. There has been no allegation, suggestion anywhere by anyone in the administration that she somehow fell short on the job, that she screwed something up, that she didn't play ball, that she defied an order. The authority given on the form that was conveyed that terminated her employment says, it's in the complaint, authority to terminate, Article 2 of the Constitution. Okay, you can make that argument. Reason for firing. Do you know what the reason for firing? You know what it says?
No, what does it say?
Also, Article 2 of the Constitution. That's authority, but how is that a reason?
This always reminds me.
I don't know. Ninth Amendment.
It's like I'm just not in a jokey mood about this one. I think because this case is important for DOJ and for prosecutors, it's also important beyond the Justice Department, right? This is a case about whether the President of the United States can turn the bureaucracy, the civil service, into a loyalty corps. Can he just fire people for no reason, for bad reason, because he thinks they're insufficiently loyal? So it's a really serious matter, even beyond Maurene Comey's situation. The irony here is she gets an outstanding rating. That's, prosecutors get evaluated every year, just like most people in jobs. That's the highest rating that you can get at DOJ. And so let's assume, and there's just no evidence of this whatsoever, but let's say she had fallen short on something. You don't just, your opener is not to fire somebody. In fact, DOJ and the civil service regs require progressive discipline and working with somebody to correct their performance, yada, yada, yada. And it takes forever to fire somebody. But Donald Trump, like he said in 2019 at the Turning Point USA conference where he spoke to young people, he said, I have an Article 2 and it gives me all the power. And this is the theory he's pushing again here.
So why don't we explain to people how this works? So I was fired. I have never suggested in any form.
You were fired.
I was fired by the same guy.
Yeah, but that's different, right?
As was Maurene's dad. Yeah. I was not entitled to tenure. That firing was perfectly legal and constitutional. Same as if you had been fired. We were political appointees. The only political appointee in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York is the U.S. Attorney. The other 499 or some odd folks have civil service protection once they've been there and gotten through the probationary period. So what's the reason for that?
Well, right. It's because under the Constitution, right, the ability to regulate these employees who are considered the legal term is inferior employees, as opposed to somebody like Preet or me in my job. We're the unique folks in that classification where the president controls our fate. These folks in the civil service, Congress has the power to legislate the rules that govern their employment, and Congress has done that and has created all sorts of due process protections that apply, notice, and the opportunity to be heard before you can be fired. And so Trump, by stepping in, is acting ultra vires. He's acting beyond his legal authority.
Ultra vires. Okay,
yeah.
Class. What does that mean?
It literally means beyond your legal authority or power.
So the policy reasons undergirding civil service protection make sense. Now, are there abuses? You and I have talked about this before. It's very, very, very difficult for the U.S. Attorney to remove someone, terminate someone from their position. Obviously, in this case, it's different. This is not the U.S. Attorney doing the terminating. It's the president himself, ostensibly under Article 2. I used to think it might have been nice to be able to get a little more authority to remove someone who wasn't doing their job or didn't have good judgment. Over time and repeatedly, But the reason you have the basic civil service protection is, among other things, to avoid corruption in the ranks of government officials and to
If you
avoid
did
having
not
this.
have that, right, every
Yeah,
time there was a new administration, the new U.S. attorney could come in, fire all the people who are qualified and competent and committed to serving, and just replace them with his own people. And that's
yeah.
what those protections prevent.
You get a government, you get sort of a civil service um, army of cronies and hacks and people who are not competent and who are beholden. It's a spoil system. And by the way, that used to be how it used to work in lots of U.S. attorneys' offices, 100 some odd years ago, including the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. And that is not how justice is done. Should there be limitations, or should there be paths to make sure that people who are not doing their job or not serving the public properly can be more easily removed? We can have that debate. We can talk about that. But the assertion that a president of the United States can reach down into any agency and for any reason or no reason or a discriminatory reason remove that person, it's not good policy. It's not good law. It's not good adherence to the Constitution. Should we talk about what exactly the reasons are that we can conjure, or I'm sorry, that we can, I guess, speculate on as to why she was fired and what she says in the complaint about why she was fired, given
Yes,
that she had no egregious conduct at all.
she offers three reasons, right? My dad is Jim Comey, and he and
Yeah,
Donald Trump have beef. Former director of the FBI, fired by Trump, the guy whose resignation and subsequent release of information led to the Mueller investigation. So that's one. And then there's this notion that, there's less about this in the complaint, but she says because of her perceived political views or affiliations.
yeah. Um, but on the being the daughter of Jim Comey, the hook is Jim Comey's First Amendment rights and Jim Comey's political views and his free speech rights. So there's a First Amendment claim. There's also a Fifth Amendment claim, denial of due process. Now, there's another sort of interesting thing because we like to get a little weedy and explain to people things that you don't hear about on television since we have a little bit more time. Ordinarily, there is a board you can go to that deals with the civil service if you have a complaint. And they argue in this complaint here, in this lawsuit, that it would have been futile to go to that board, the MSPB, because why?
Because Donald Trump has hung it up by refusing to appoint people to serve on it. The Merit Systems Protection Board, I think there's some argument, by the way, about whether assistant U.S. attorneys can go there. I've heard it both ways, but at least
Yeah.
for purposes of the complaint, she's saying, look, to the extent that I'm required to go there before I file a lawsuit, it would be pointless to do that. And so there's this technical legal notion that you have to exhaust your administrative remedies before you can go to court on a complaint like this. And she says it would be fruitless, so I'm not required to do it, which I think I might be wrong. There might be a couple of other lawsuits, now that I think about it, where federal employees who've been fired have made that argument. But this is something that no court has really firmly sunk its teeth into yet. And I'm very interested in this aspect of the complaint, too.
I don't think we mentioned another hypothesis as to why Maurene Comey was fired. There's a person who I don't pay a lot of attention to and haven't really spoken about before, but this other person features prominently in the complaint, and it's someone named Laura Loomer. Who on God's green earth, Joyce, is Laura Loomer?
She has millions of followers on social media. She is far right. She allegedly, according to the complaint, has Donald Trump's ear. And she, on social media, acknowledged that she wanted to see Maurene Comey fired. She says that she ran a campaign with Pam Bondi, who in her tweets, she calls Pam Blondie, which is sort of a weird thing.
It's great because
Um,
repeatedly throughout the complaint, they
Pam
quote Laura Loomer
Blondie.
as Blondie,
Yeah.
and they have to say, spelling and context, sick. Every time it's Pam Blondie.
So, I think this is a very interesting feature of the complaint. They're using evidence that it's going to be tough to deny to say that here's the timeline that this happened on. Loomer is narrating it in public. Maurene Comey gets fired on this timeline. Loomer takes credit for it. And by the way, the reason that Loomer is putting forward in her complaints why she's suggesting Comey should be fired is precisely the stuff she alleges in the complaint. Who her dad is, what her politics are.
Are you surprised that she filed a lawsuit?
No, I've been rooting for her to do it all along from the get-go. What do you think?
No, we've talked about it on the Insider podcast. I know you got to run. I took Joyce away from, I think, the ending of recording the audio version of her book, doing pickups for her book. So I know you got to get back and do a lot of other stuff. Can you explain to folks why it's important that somebody who still has a lot of opportunity and options and can make a heck of a lot more money, that's what people don't fully understand. She's fired from her AUSA job, but given her talents and her background and her experience, she'll be just fine professionally and financially and economically. And she didn't have to do this. She could have left the fight. Why is it important to people other than the plaintiff, other than Maurene Comey, that she brought this lawsuit?
It's, I think, very similar to the interim United States attorney in the Southern District of New York who resigned. Maurene Comey had the ability to bring this lawsuit. She had the voice, she had the power, she had the resources. She clearly has the family support and wherewithal to withstand the storm that's coming. And so in many ways, she becomes one of the thousands of markers that regular people are putting down every day to save this democracy. And there's a point in the complaint that I think is sort of poignant, where I feel like we're hearing her voice a little bit. Some of the procedural due process claims involve her reputation. And they make the point that her reputation is damaged, and this will always stay with her. There will be the suggestion that the allegations that Laura Loomer and others made about her are true because she was fired. And sure, she'll be able to go on and have a very successful career, whatever she chooses to do. God bless her. I hope she's a future Attorney General of the United States. But, the reality is something like this stings and it hurts. And you know that. You know that from when you were fired.
Yeah. Although I will say on that score, I have viewed it over time, and certainly I now see it as a complete badge of honor, and and something that I'm proud of. To have been fired by Donald Trump is not at all a sign. At least at this point, certainly is not a sign of not having done your job. In many ways, it's a sign of not bending the knee. And when I think about what message I want to give to the public, whatever industry you're in, whether it's media or law or anything else, the bending of the knee is the worst thing you can do. And I think courage is in low supply, and cowardice seems more prevalent everywhere. These things are hard when bad things happen. These things are hard when people want to undo norms and violate the rule of law and intimidate other folks. But every time someone stands up and does something that's difficult and hard, when they don't have to do it, like this lawsuit is going to be difficult and hard, it makes an easier path for other people who maybe are not as privileged or as resourced. So I wish her well. Any final words, Joyce?
Everything you say is true. I think courage is contagious. And look, you don't have to go out and win the whole war to save democracy single-handedly on your own. What matters is that we've got 2.8 thousand people here at it's 4:52 in the afternoon in my time zone. We call that God's time in Alabama. But there are a lot of us here thinking about what we need to do. And we really can work when we can, support people who are doing the work when we can't, but keep the faith and don't give up, don't bend the knee.
Don't bend the knee. That's my new phrase. I'm going to put that, I think, on my social media bio. What is it, Joyce? Don't
bend the knee.
All right, everyone. If you're in an earlier time zone than I'm in, get back to work. If you're in Joyce's time zone, you got 7 more minutes, I think, to do. If you're a 9 to 5er, Joyce, good luck with the book
Thank you
and
so
with everything
much.
else. And folks, check us out on the podcast, the Insider Podcast, every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday. We'll see y'all soon.